Hi everyone, I'm Alistair Ben and you're watching Expressive Photography. I'm sure many of you have come back from a photo trip out feeling disappointed, disheartened, beating yourself up because you haven't got what you hoped to. In this video, I want to look at some of the excuses that we use to try and make ourselves feel better about that. But in actual fact, it's probably more like the lies we tell ourselves to try and make us feel better about that. Now, I've just come back from leading a photography workshop out here on the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, and we had some really challenging weather, and I mean challenging in quotes. We had blue sky days, we had days where there was no wave action and it was very calm, we had heavy wind and rain, we had drizzle, we had pretty much the full spectrum of what you could expect over a week-long period on the west of Scotland. So it would be very easy to look at those conditions and think, well, you know, the weather wasn't right, the conditions weren't right, whereas in actual fact, I've made some images that I absolutely love in the last week. It's worth noting that I always photograph when I'm with clients purely because it helps me to see the problems that are there at the time. And secondly, I find it easier to teach when I have a camera in my hand and I can show and illustrate what it is I'm doing. So the first excuse is the blame game. It's looking to blame something or someone or the weather, for example, that it's not delivering what we need to make good photographs. We've all been in this situation. The weather isn't right, the clouds aren't right, but right for what is the question that I would ask you to ask yourself. Right for what? The expectations that you have, the photographs that you've seen from those locations before, how to replicate somebody else's creativity or vision. I think this is what we usually mean by the conditions aren't right. And if I dive in and show you an example of that, then maybe that will help to illustrate my point. So in this first image, classic sunset shot of a lighthouse on the east coast of the Isle of Harris. Beautiful location, really not pretty clouds, not a lot of great light, but you know, it was a pretty place to be. So a lot of people get frustrated because the sun isn't blaring in the sky or the light isn't cracking off. And what I did, I noticed this reflection here of the lighthouse, this orange stripe in the water. I also really liked these two pointy rocks. So in my usual style, I thought, right, I am going to make a photograph just using those two elements. And this is the resulting photograph, using the reflection of the lighthouse with the blue water and those two pointy rocks. These are more or less raw files. I've just cropped them and equalized the highlights and shadows a little bit to try and make sure that we can see what's going on in them. This is not the final version of the photograph. But the point is that the conditions might be not right for one type of photograph, but it's almost certainly right for another type of photograph. So the second excuse I think a lot of people make is that they start forcing it. Now, forcing it might not necessarily be an excuse, but it's certainly a behavior that people tend to do. We all think about landscape photography as foreground, midground, background. That is the classic approach. And if one was going to follow a rules-based approach to making successful photographs, then that is a traditional way of going about it. On this particular morning, again, blue sky, not a lot of great light. It is traditional or thought to be traditional to stick something in the foreground and then show the background. Now, I'm going to actually quickly process this photograph. I'm in DxO Photo Lab 8 and any photo editor will do, but I happen to be in Photo Lab 8. So the first thing about it is that I'm seeing something here that this is the full frame that I had taken, and it is there for a purpose, which is this is not what I photographed. I shot this photograph as a panoramic, a 65 by 24, and I will just quickly tidy this up a fraction. And very, very quickly, as soon as we start to play around with this photograph and change some of the dynamic range. I really do like those warm tones and the cool tones. Simplifying the scene, getting rid of some of those bigger picture elements is a way to produce something that kind of is a distillation of that landscape. Now, this is what happens when I don't try to force things, by not forcing a photograph into a wide angle perspective. This video is sponsored by Case Filters, Capture with Confidence. Click on the link in the description below and use the code Alistair for a 5% discount. So another attribute that's common in people who tend to blame the conditions or their equipment for their poor photography is their attitude. My feeling about this is that photography is not simple. It should be challenging. There's nothing in the world that was ever satisfying that was easy. We feel better when we push ourselves and when we challenge ourselves. And unfortunately, with landscape photography, not challenging ourselves can actually be a real handicap for us. My main thoughts on this is that the attitude that we have when we go into the landscape is very much going to dictate the type of experience we have when we're there. And what I would like to pose to you here is the difference between being open and being closed. If you're open, you are going to see photographs, opportunities, and compositions everywhere. And if you're closed, you're going to go in there with an expectation, and all you will see is what you hope to see, or more commonly, you will fail to see what you hope to see and you will get frustrated. These are both full frame photographs, and both of these photographs were actually cropped in camera. However, I'm showing the full frame again just to demonstrate that the whole scene is sometimes too much. The left-hand image here was taken with my 100 to 200 millimeter zoom, and it's a slice of a landscape. It's part of a landscape. There were certainly bits of this scene that I really liked, and you can see them all in here. And I can look at ways of cropping that scene down to produce something that is more concise. So I can look at the image on the left and think, yes, I can definitely do something with that with a different aspect ratio. However, the image of the right I shot with my 500mm prime. Remember that guy, the star of my frustrated video? The image on the right is taken at 500 millimeters. And you can see what I've done is I've zoomed in on the bit that I'm most interested in. That is the area of the frame that I felt was going to deliver the most bang for my buck. And again, if I come in and use the crop tool to choose a different aspect ratio, I can quickly zone in on that area of the frame, or maybe that's a little too tight. I can go 2:1. And there is a little bit of juggling to be done at the bottom of the frame there, because some of these rocks are intruding on what I consider to be the best bit of the photograph. But let's go with that for now. This now feels like a really concise and distilled version of that whole scene. And the bottom line is that I only made this photograph because I was open to seeing bits of the scene that I was more interested in than others. It's very, very easy to use shooting with a wide-angled lens as an excuse to basically photograph everything. However, more often than not, there is something in that scene that is more appealing, more photographically pleasing than perhaps the whole scene is going to be. The fourth excuse for not making photographs that you like is that you may not have considered the impact of time. Time, as I have mentioned many times on this channel before, is a creative superpower, and I think it is one that we should really, really understand if we want to make better photographs. This photograph here was one of the last that I took on the particular workshop before we fled to the car and back to Stornoway, and the wind was howling in our face. There was a huge rainstorm coming in. It was very, very challenging conditions, much like it is outside while I'm recording this video, in fact. But I felt that the shutter speed was so critical to try and make the best of this particular scene. This, I think, is a third of a second. It's either a third or a quarter of a second. And I managed to time it so that this wave was smashing, and this is a bouncing back, so this is the wave hitting the cliff and then hitting another wave as it comes back to meet it. And it's created this very serendipitous and energetic and flamboyant photograph. If I hadn't been aware of the shutter speed, I might have ended up shooting these scenes a thousandth of a second. And what happens is that all of these waves in the foreground get very, very contrasty. They get tons of detail, and they end up making quite busy photographs when we already have some quite interesting and exciting foreground elements, with these rocky spires and so forth. By contrast, this image was made with a 10-stop case ND filter, and it is a 4-minute exposure. Different location, different time, different day, still very flat, very overcast, not a lot of light, no colour in the sky. This was mid-morning, so it wasn't golden hour or anything like that. But the colour in the rocks is my sunrise. And using the long exposure to create this very, very abstract and smooth stage has really gone a long way to making this a much, much more exciting photograph. The final point is we get so accustomed to shooting full frame that I think a lot of people forget the power of cropping, the power of distilling and simplifying a scene. It's almost very rare these days that the full frame is going to perfectly capture the mood, the feel, the aspect ratio, and the kind of energy within the frame as we would want it to be. I shoot, as you may know, with the GFX 100 Mark II. That's a native 4:3 sensor, medium format sensor. And 4:3 is quite an attractive aspect ratio. I certainly prefer it to 3:2, which is your traditional full frame DSLR aspect ratio or mirrorless camera ratio. 4:3 is quite a classy looking aspect ratio. If I look at this one here, I actually cropped this in camera to a square, but I am showing you the full frame to show you why I cropped it into a square. So if I look at this full frame scene here, you will notice there's this puddle down in the bottom right hand side. And it's a very innocent little puddle. It's not causing any offense, except to me. Because compositionally it was in my way and I didn't really feel it was adding anything to the frame. So I cropped this as a 1:1, and I can see that as soon as I do that, and I'll just pull down that edge a bit. So if I start looking at that as a 1:1 aspect ratio, the content that I have removed has actually improved the photograph. And there's an old saying that a composition isn't finished when you can't find anything else to cram into it. It's probably going to be better if you can't find anything else to remove. And by remove, I'm not talking about, just distilling down until all there is left are these tiny little small scenes, but of course we can do that. The bottom line is that we can make our compositions more simple. I've talked about simplicity before on the channel, but there's little things in here like this square, this little area of the frame here. And what I might actually find is that this could be better as a 4:5. And because I can make this a little bit bigger, move things around, there is some light in this scene that I would probably have to go in and dodge and burn. There's some of these brighter areas we probably could do with a little bit of pulling down. So I think I'll just quickly grab a vignette and just pull the edges down a fraction just to kind of take a little bit of the heat out of that side there. But this composition here is much, much more distilled than the original scene. I've managed to get rid of some of the things that I was finding annoying. I've been photographing for 25 years now, and the only reason I can make this video with any sense of conviction is that I have made every excuse and I have told myself numerous lies over the decades to try and make myself feel better about sucking as a photographer. It's human nature to try and blame somebody else or something else for our downfall or our lack of creativity or our lack of performance on a given day. Excuses are human nature, but I would definitely urge you to think about what is it that you're bringing to the table that is actually adversely affecting your own photography. I think some of the things I've raised today, such as the excuses that we make, blaming the weather conditions, blaming the equipment that we might have with us, blaming the people who we're with for getting in the way, whatever it might be, or not seeing the opportunities that are present right in front of our noses because we are being closed and we are shutting down our openness to being more aware of what is around us. I truly believe that it doesn't matter what the weather, it can be misty, rainy, foggy, cloudy, blue skies, golden light, beautiful sunsets, or even dark, and we can go out there and make creative and interesting photographs. The most important person in any photograph, as Ansel Adams said, is the person behind the lens, not in front of it. We are the captains of our own destiny when it comes to our own photography. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Like I said, I've been using DxO Photolab 8 in this video. I still have a discount code for 15% off that is valid until the end of October, 30th of October, I believe it is. Look in the description for that. And obviously I have been using case filters to get my longer shutter speeds or polarizing if necessary. Thank you very much for watching. I do look forward to speaking to you again next week, but for now, thank you very much. Bye for now.